That's basically on record. So what we're going to do now, we're going to start. So is there any news? Is there any news from Kate?
No, I don't think so. But I have a thrilling raffle prize today.
You have a really good raffle prize.
Suitable for all ages.
Okay, you're going to need to put your mic up a bit. So no news from you, Kate. What about Kathy? Anything you'd like to say, darling?
No, I don't think there's nothing new. No, thanks.
Are you guys sounding really faint?
Let me see if I can turn it up.
We can't hear you now. Peter, can you hear them?
No.
They've done something to their mic.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. You can't hear a word. That's good. Keep it like that.
Are you monster?
Okay, then. Well, as we can't hear you at all, I don't know what's gone wrong. Richard, anything you'd like to say, darling?
No, wagtail just come across my patio.
Oh, that was strange. I didn't. When Richard didn't even open his mouth then when he said there's a blue wagtail. So, Richard, anything you'd like to say, darling?
No, nothing new.
Okay. What about you, Peter? Other than your wagtail?
No. Nice little robin down the end of the garden, but apart from that, no.
Okay, no, that's
no
fine.
cats.
Well, I was driving along the other day, and in the middle of the road, just looking up at me, and I drove right over it. Was a blue tit. When I say I drove right over it, it drove between the wheels. So I thought, oh God. So I turned the car around, and it was still standing in the same spot. So I picked it up, put him in my top. It was a boy. It was a blue tit, and it's the first time I've ever seen a blue tit sleeping. When it went to sleep. So there we go.
Oh, good,
so we all do our bit for Mother Nature.
Well done. Well done.
So and there was no cat inside, Pete.
Good.
So there was no cat inside. Well, seeing as we can't hear, I don't know. It would be useful if we could hear Kate and their gang, but I can't hear them at all. So I'm just going to see why. Richard hasn't even muted them.
No. Oh, I've got a missile thrush here at my fat ball.
Oh, nice.
See, look at this. We can't. Kate's moving her mouth, and we can't even hear her. Ideal. Right. Okay. So I want to tell you a true story. Right. In 1891, this is as true as the day. Right.
Yeah.
There was a visit by the Tsar of Russia to Barry. And he wanted to check over the coal boats, right? And he met a guy called Peter, and he went fishing. The question is, which part of the story is false? Anyway, let's crack on. So, where were we last week, Richard? Remind us.
I can't remember. What were you discussing?
You can't remember what we were discussing? Oh my God, Richard, that's absolutely
I think we were
terrible.
on about Barry Islands, Friars Point.
But you also made the amazing point about Cumkiddy, didn't you? And I know this is on record, and we can write this down and whatever. I think the idea that you're right. You've got stones in the fields at Cumkiddy, and I'm going to take as you as right because I haven't actually looked at the NLS mapping. But you've got these two stones randomly in the field, and obviously you've got Neolithic evidence. You've got flints, and you've got other evidence from different periods. And you could be thinking that would, to be honest with you, that would be the ideal spot for a Neolithic burial landscape. So I thought that was a really deep and interesting point that we actually made last week. So one of the things clearly that we can say is that last week we actually managed to get to looking at the Neolithic period, and one of the things that we I don't think we really actually got to was explaining a little bit more about Tinkinswood burial chamber. So what we're going to do, we're going to try and get an image of Tinkinswood up on the screen, which will not take me a few minutes at all. So this is where we're going to go, and we're just going to go directly to there. And we're going to see what I've been looking at this morning. Rammed. Basically, I was making a rammed path, a rammed pathway, which is a way of making a path from field stones that you put together in a path. And this was a technique that they used to use in the medieval period. So I've done a little video about that. So what we're going to do, we're going to chuck this image straight on. And if you ever do go and looking at Tinkinswood burial chamber with images online, it's likelihood that some of them might be mine. So this is Tinkinswood burial chamber, and one of the points that I feel is very important when looking.
Yeah.
Right, shh. I can hear you now, ladies. One of the interesting points in regards to Tinkinswood burial chamber is not only the way it was discovered, but the way it was excavated and the way it was then presented to the public. Now, without being armed with an archaeologist like me, you may think the Tinkinswood chamber, i.e. brackets burial chamber, has always looked like this. And the answer is no, it hasn't. And one of the clues to understanding what was going on with Tinkinswood burial chamber is the chap who actually excavated Tinkinswood, a chap by the name of John Ward, who actually become a curator of the relatively new, very new Museum of Wales, Museum Cymru, National Museum of Wales. And what he felt was that in looking at the past, you've got to give future generations an opportunity to undo the things that you may have got wrong. And what he decided was that where you see the herringbone on the right there, that is a complete reconstruction by this guy, Mr. Ward. That is not original. And that is really, really important. So when you do go to Tinkinswood today, the massive mistake that Cadw makes is in presenting this chamber as a reconstruction on the board which is nearby. And what they do, they present it like this. And actually, if we go out, they present it. If we there you go. They present it something like this. It may never have ever looked like this. If in fact, others believe there was soil on top of that capstone. I believe that the capstone, there was no soil on top of it. But maybe I don't believe it actually looked like this. Other than the capstone and the stands in there, this is a reconstruction based on the work of Ward. And what Ward was saying is, don't actually take what I'm presenting as being the real McCoy. Just think that it may have looked slightly different. Now, another thing that Ward did, which was actually quite helpful, but in some ways not helpful in others, was that when he had excavated it, he actually put that thing there on the left. That's actually got the date 1914. And he put that there to give extra support to the capstone above. Now, there's lots of talk whether there was actually a side on this, where that stack is. You could think that it may have been left open. Where are the stones that were once there? That's the big question. What you are looking at is the stone behind that pillar, and the one on the right, the one on the left, and the capstone above. Probably some of the main elements of the original site that was excavated by Ward in just before the First World War. Now, I'm going to make quite a brash statement, which is probably very unfair. It seems that lots of archaeologists didn't go to fight in the First and the Second World War. I can't really work out why that is. Maybe it's because their academic credentials meant that they didn't need to do service, or they were needed to be kept back to keep our precious national objects safe, which is probably more close to the mark. So they certainly weren't cowards. So 1914 is the year that this site was being excavated by a little gang by Ward. And what was discerned was that there may have been up to 40 individuals at one stage interred in this sepulchre of the dead. Now, there's two words of warning with that statement. It's turned out that there's probably beyond 50 now. Secondly, they were placed into this building at different times. And thirdly, it may never have been originally constructed as a burial chamber. It may have been constructed as a chamber for another purpose. And that purpose we don't know. Most of the bones at most of these types of sites seemingly date to the later periods of use of this chamber. Other archaeologists have explained the reason why that is on a regular basis. The old bones were swept out and replaced by new bones. But even the bones that they actually found in there seemingly turned out to be only bits of bones. We didn't get complete human beings in there. So we had bits of skull of one person, bit of arm bone of another person, bit of a leg bone. All these different bones were sort of in there higgledy-piggledy. I didn't want this to be a talk about Tinkinswood Burial Chamber. I wanted this to be just a general, again, historical talk based on what we've got in this Barry book in front of me. Sort of going through this history, picking into things that are right, picking into things that might be wrong. But what we do find with the Barry book, there's really not much. There's only really 2 paragraphs written about this chamber in the Barry book. Technically, it's not in Barry, it's within the district of Barry. And the question is, were there chambers like this in the Barry area, directly in the Barry area? I believe that there may have been, and there would have been. If we think about the mindsets of people living then, we're talking about 5,000-6,000 years ago, the mindset was sort of, well, we'll build these big things. And the reason why they're building these big things is actually more practical. And it goes on to the idea that probably 7,000-8,000 years ago, people were more peaceable. People were more family orientated. As the Neolithic developed, people gathered into communities. They were still very much peaceable people, but land was at a premium. So what they decided was that instead of having areas where people would be buried in their family groupings, which would be at sites such as causewayed enclosures, which is another lecture which we'll start on another day, they decided that they would collect the bones up, bones that had been exposed to the elements and animals picked away at the flesh and stuff. So pick those bones up, put them maybe in a cloth bag or a wooden bucket or pottery, and then they would put them into this sort of sepulchre, ossuary of bones of the dead. In other words, this is a strange concept. This is very much keeping members of the family as saints. What do I mean by that? Well, they revered their loved ones. They kept loved ones' bones with them, bits of skull, bits of teeth, bits of arm bones, and so on. I've done it, right? I think we've all done it. I've kept the teeth of my children. Well, most of them. I think I've got teeth of Bethan, Amaya, maybe Owen, not Kerry Ann, but I've got 6 children, so I got at least teeth of probably 4 of them, and I've actually got the hair of I think Emily and Amaya. So I got bits. I've got physical, organic bits of my children, which some of you might think is absolutely disgusting, but I would say that maybe even Pete kept his children's teeth when they were children. So what they were doing in the past, everybody. What they were doing in the past is keeping some of these bones very much as we keep teeth and hair today. And even in the Victorian period, there was a cult of cutting a deceased person's hair, putting it in a locket, putting it into a bracelet around your arm and so on. And you know, what we do today in Victorian period is not much different from what they did in the past. And I've got to be honest with you, if my granddad had been buried, and I had an opportunity to have one of his bones, I would keep that bone in a locket with me, and that would be a revered object. But that's to do more with religious reasons. But I would be very much connected with my granddad. So you know, this is luckily for my granddad, he was cremated. But the point is that we can sort of connect with the past with these types of sites. And I think somebody just shouted my name. Is that correct? Somebody did actually shout Carl. Oh my God, it was nobody. I must be hearing things. So if we look at another image, and I believe that sort of that's a reconstruction by Cadu. That is absolute poppycock. It's just nonsense.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, it does look, and that's actually the reconstruction they actually use on the site. And to be honest with you, Kate, right, I like the word ridiculous, right? And the thing is, right, why can't we see the past? That's one of my images. Those are my friends. I haven't seen them in ages. Oh God.
Lovely.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's Alex on the left. That's their boy. And that was taken when I actually slept on top of the burial chamber this one night. I'll tell you a little bit about this. I didn't know this image was there. There was this one night, right? I decided to go to Tesco's and I filled up my car and with all these bits and pieces. And I had a pop-up tent and I had another tent. And I knew that there was going to be people on Midsummer's Eve there. And I bumped into a good old friend of mine at Tesco's that day called Alan. Love him to bits. And Alan Gibbon, if you're out there watching this, and Alex, there's Alex there, not Alan, there's Alex. And I met this little gang, and they said, well, we're not going to stay here the night, but we all had a little bit of a feast. I camped out on top of the stone, right, with my pop-up tent. It was great. And they come and visited me in the morning, and it was and I saw the summer solstice and all the rest of it. Nobody else turned up with me that night, but it was a beautiful experience. And I've just shared something that is actually quite primeval in a way, that people had beautiful experiences there in the past as well. So all I'm on top of that stone within this setting. And I believe that Ward did this site justice by telling us the stuff that he wasn't exactly sure that was real or not. And I got another little story for you. I'm not going to go into detail because the person would be upset if I mentioned their name, but they had a very good friend, and she said, oh, what can we spread this person's ashes at Tinkinswood Burial Chamber, because I always loved Tinkinswood Burial Chamber. So I got we got the ashes, and we stood on top of the capstone, right? And the wind was actually blowing in the opposite direction, right? Unfortunately, unfortunately, it changed its direction. So as we spread the ashes, it spread all over the stones and stuff, in all the little bits of crevices on the stone, right? So there's bits of human bones from somebody from about 25 years ago, spread over Tinkinswood Burial Chamber. But it was a really good experience, and the sorry, I got to get back into the archaeology, but there's really one strange story that I tell. I could talk about Tinkinswood for hours, but I'll tell you one quick story. I could tell you more about this detail again. I had a ghost walk this one night, and after the ghost walk, everyone begged me not to go back and have a little look at Tinkinswood, because it's what I do as part of my OCD thing. So. And they said, please don't go back with it and feel that there's a bad thing going on here tonight. So I went back and I saw the bloody ghost of this guy's ashes that we actually spread on the burial chamber.
Blimey.
I can't make it up. I'll tell you more about that story again, because I just didn't give it justice. So if I love those guys, I love them. Oh, wicked! I really, really do. Hang on a minute. That's one of my photographs. They put it on a bloody another website. Anyway, right. So I'm not going to moan. Right. So this is what it looks like inside. And interesting enough, you can see sort of a weird sort of surface inside, and this inside is basically more or less unweathered stone from the outside elements. The stone outside is weathered, but this is not weathered inside. And it's likely that this stone itself was probably exposed very close to the surface when they used it. So they really didn't quarry much for this stone. And the one thing that we do know, now this is a very strange thing. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the woman that I later married, it was midsummer solstice, right? And not going to go into too much detail. It'll be in my autobiography one day. But I decided at 12 o'clock at midnight to take my clothes off and run around the field. Unfortunately, I could hear a didgeridoo in the background. So there was this guy wandering across with the field with a didgeridoo. So I quickly dived into the chamber, got my clothes on. And there was another guy. This is another guy called Alex. Right, this is a really strange story. There's another guy called Alex, right? And Alex, interestingly enough, played his didgeridoo through the night hours, and when the sun came up, when the sun came up, he was playing his didgeridoo. Strangely enough, this is a really strange thing, and this was in 1995. I couldn't believe this. I got to get the dates right. 95 to 5/15. 21 years later, he turned up at my archaeology class in Bridgend, and guess what? With a business card I gave him in 1995. With a business card I actually gave him, and he actually visited my class, and he said, "Remember me when I was playing my didgeridoo?" I'm glad he didn't turn up and say, "Remember me when I saw you naked flashing across the field." Yeah, have you noticed this thing about me taking my clothes off, flashing through places, is actually becoming a regular thing?
Yeah.
Sorry, Peter wasn't too impressed with that. But interesting enough, the reason why I mentioned that story is because the guy with him, right? He said to me that if you root around the cracks and crevices within this chamber, you can actually still find human bone. I kid you not, because he said to me he'd actually found a small bone once, and he took it to the museum, and they said it's a human bone, and they'd actually found it here. So when Ward was excavating, he was quite thorough, but with most things in archaeology, not everything was found. And strangely enough, I think it was in 2009, 2010, they undertook an archaeological excavation, not inside the chamber, but outside the chamber, and they found more human bones to actually add to the collection. And the human bones actually found in here represented men, male children, and guess what? Women, elderly people, girls. And in other words, everything that what we used to think about this chamber, we used to think about the elite were placed into it, the special people in the community. Well, I got to be honest with you, right? In the Neolithic period, when people were gathering together in groups, people were still having to do everything. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have roads. They didn't have utility companies. They didn't have supermarkets and all the rest of it. Everybody had to muck in and be part of the community back in this Neolithic period. And the reason why I'm saying that, if you think for 1 minute that people had time to have leaders, you can think again. When you've got leaders, for example, right, what we're going to do, Pete is our ceremonial leader today, right? So what we've got to do, we've got to make sure that when we've got to buy stuff for Pete, we've got to pay for his electricity, we've got to pay for his water, we've got to do everything for Pete, and we've got to pay for Peter's TV license for Peter to watch television, right? And I'm sure we'd all get a bit resentful after a while, but the point is that in the past wasn't like that. Everyone was part of society. And it was only coming into the Bronze and particularly the Iron Age where people actually started to say, hang on a minute, I am Pete. I'm the one in charge and you've got to do things for me. In the Neolithic period, there weren't enough people to have aristocracy and leaders. And what was proven within this chamber, that the human bones that they actually found were representative of the community, everyone in the community. And that's really, really important. So there's nobody like Pete in the Neolithic period. We are all equal. And I'm reminded of that A Life of Brian film when he actually says, we're all individual. And a guy says, well, I'm not. The point is, everyone was very much individual in the Neolithic period, because if you didn't do your bit within society, right, that was it. You couldn't survive. And one of the things, sorry, Pete, I used you as an analogy. Pete, you're no longer head of the community. You're out.
Oh.
Right. Pete, I didn't want you to feel that you were a freeloader, which you're certainly not. But because Pete's worked all his life, I thought I'd put that in there. Pete, I represented you wrongly. But what I would like to say is that, you know, in society, people only started to become special when they exhibited special skills, which were needed within society. Today we use the word special needs. Well, it actually meant special needs. Basically, people may have been able to produce pottery, which nobody was able to make. So that was a need. That was a special need. So in the Iron Age, for example, people were able to turn stone into iron. That was a special need. That was something that they felt was really, really special within the world. But we're still in the Neolithic period. And what we've got to say specifically about this site, right, is the reason why this is hocus pocus. And the reason why looking at this is more akin to our generation is very much that obviously there was a little bit more soil built over this, and you wouldn't have been able to see the stones on the left and the right, the ones that are our contemporary, particularly the ones on the left. Those stones would have been still sticking out. And what we do know from other archaeological evidence, that site itself was still being used in the Bronze Age, so 4,000 years ago. So we've moved 2,000 years on. It was still being used in the Iron Age. It was definitely still being used in the Roman period. And guess what? We found pottery there associated with the medieval period. So in other words, what people were doing, they were seeing that this site was important. They had a connection with this site. And one of the final things I'd like to say is that if we want to spread this directly to the Barry area, there would have been sites like this in the Barry area, directly in Barry, because where else would you keep a bone that was very, very special and associated with a loved one? You would need to keep it in a site like this, and you need to keep that bone very, very special. And maybe when the family thinks this, okay, we just need to let the bone lie now, right? We need to let it go. We've mourned long enough. Let's just put the bone in there. And in fact, I think we can connect with that. We can connect with that. You know, I'm very much connected with nature, and when one of my animals dies, I can get very, very upset, right? And I you know, but there's a point that you've got to let things go, you know, and it's with human beings as well. You know, we can carry people's memories with us all our lives, and I completely agree with that. We can mourn them all our lives. But at some point, we've got to let them go a little bit. And we've got to say, right, I'm always going to come and visit you. I'm always going to remember you. I'm always going to feel that this bone of yours is special. But I'm going to put that there. You know, I've got to plough the field now. You know, I've got to do this and that. And these people are very much human, very much connected to us. than we think. So, was there anything like this directly in the Barry area? I would say yes. And also, there's just not this site only. It's, you know, reflected within our landscape over to Bombleston is another site called oh God, I keep making
st.Lythans.
no, there's another one, Pete. It's called
Yeah, there is another one. Yeah,
yeah, I think it's called Coed Cum. I can always get the name
that's
missing.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other one, right? It's actually, Pete is so right in what he's saying, st.Lythans. Now, as far as I know, this is the only st.Lythans around, right? So what we've got, st.Lythans chamber, and look at that. It's so different than the one on the right. It's there. Right, this was also excavated, and this is a really, really nice image. Leading off in the background is the remains of a mound, which would classify it as a long barrow. And this monument itself is very different from the one that we've already seen. It's more concise.
Carl,
Sorry, Pete, go.
when last time I was at Tinkinswood, I was there with my grandson, who's a doctorate, and there was a student archaeologist from Cardiff University there, and he'd been studying it, and he's connected it to actually a system of fertility as well. It was thought to be a very fertile site where men and women could get together and produce. And he was quite impressed with that. And he connected it also with st.Lythans on a straight line with st.Lythans.
And as somebody it's a place that yes, she did end up falling pregnant. So I'm not going to give you any more. So the idea and we had 4 children, but yeah. Anyway, the point is Pete's got a good point. So I've just proven it. But the thing is right. Pete's just said something really, really important because you know, I made it a slight bit crude, but Pete's got a good point. What was this building used for before it was used?
There is indications there. There are some markings, etc. there, and a semblance of rocks which point to that actual belief. And also inside, when we looked at that rock with the clefts, people tend to leave little tokens within the cleft.
And actually, you're very right because oh God, can I give something else away? That there's a tree when you go across the field, and you look at the front of this, right, as you go through the gate to actually get into the chamber, there's a tree in front of you, right? And I used to tie ribbons in the tree, right? And I'm not going to go into that detail, but I used to go there and I used to tie ribbons into the tree, right? And somebody that I still work with, he said, "Oh, I can't believe this. That there's sort of evil, devil, pagan worshipping going on at St. Nicholas, Tinkinswood, because somebody started tying ribbons in a tree, and it was me." But the thing is, Pete, that there's a good point to what I've just said because people misinterpret things the wrong way. And you know, I was just about to come to a point then as well, because you've actually led me back to the point that when you look at a monument like this, sometimes you look at a monument like this and you actually think, well, you know, I'm going to spit it out. Would this, if you sort of made some changes with this, right, you could actually live in there. Why is it being used for burial? I know that sounds absolutely barking, right? Absolutely insane, right? But when I first well, it wasn't the first time, but I went with this engineer this one time. I was 15. The guy is no longer with us. He was an engineer, and his name was John Knight, right? And I can remember wandering across this field with John, and I remember thinking, I didn't vocalize it. I said to myself, I said, this site, you could actually, why do people build sites like this in the past? And they lived in round houses made of earth and straw and hay, and it gets very damp and all the rest of it. And they had the ability to build beautiful monuments like this. Couldn't they have lived in them? And years later, I was sitting in a, so obviously I was 15. So let me get that right. That was 1989, 90.
You've gone quiet. Carl,
Hello?
Carl, you've gone quiet.
He's muted himself.
I was in a lecture with Professor Colin Richards from Manchester University. He'd just become he'd just become a lecturer at University of Highlands and Islands. So I sat in the room. He said, "I believe that monuments like this were used for something else before they were used as burial chambers." And I had nailed this when I was 15. I was quite in awe of what he just said. And by the way, I'm getting very if you can hear it, I'm getting very, very heavy snow at this minute. So
Yeah, we lost you for a couple of seconds.
did you?
Yeah, I lost your voice, yeah.
Right, I was basically saying about Colin Richards. So obviously, after 27 years, Colin Richards confirmed that these were used for something else before they were used as burial chambers. Because somebody did some scientific research, and it turned out that monuments like this, the evidence tells us that the bones date from the last 40 years of the use of the burial chambers, and not before. So they were being used for something else in some cases, if not most.
The
So
front of
if we
that capstone is marked
Yeah.
with male and female signs on it.
Interesting, but are they modern male or female signs?
No, they're not.
Well, I would like to see them someday, Pete. Maybe you and I, Pete, could go up there with a flask of coffee provided by you, and biscuits provided by Ruth, because I'll make a contribution, and you can show me where they are.
Yeah, this student, the archaeologist, he pointed them out to us. I wouldn't have noticed them until he actually pointed them out, and then they are quite visible on the front of the capstone.
On the capstone.
That's quite amazing.
It is, and the semblance of the stones at the back as well.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Can I just mention something? I've just had a note come through. Can I just mention something? If any of you guys ever want to join my evening class on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, the one on a Tuesday is at 7:30, and the one on a Wednesday is at 7 o'clock. We are actually looking at the Neolithic period as we speak. So if you ever want to join that class, then let me know. And naturally, there's another financial contribution for that class. But if any of you are interested at the end, then let me know. Whilst we're talking about money, don't forget your £6 this week. Kate, Kathy, Lily, and Ruth.
I've forgotten mine this week. I'll give double next week.
Oh,
Well,
Ruth, go away! You've ruined my life.
I will pay hers in.
And I'll
Okay.
pay Kate back.
Yeah, no problem. No
Hey,
problem.
that's good, guys. That's good. Anyway, don't worry about it. I thought I'd mention that in. So anyway, let's crack on. Let's crack on. This is why I like doing these little classes, because I know it's only an hour, but it's good to get feedback from people like Peter and whatever. And you know, it would be very interesting one day to sort of maybe get together and have a look at Tinkinswood. We'll be
yes,
limited.
that'd be great.
Nice.
We'd like
We'll be limited cars wise. So if Richard wants to go, Pete will have to jump into Richard's car. I'll have to jump into mine, and you guys will have to jump into Kate's, and that basically fills the car park. So one of the things that I got to say, right, and you know, we've become a bit obsessed by this now, So if we're thinking about chambers in Barry, we're thinking about ones like this. You know, ones that are not as grand as the one at Tinkinswood, and it's likely that the one at Tinkinswood is 6,000 years old, and this is closer to about 5,500 years old. Because what happens in the Neolithic period, things start to get a bit smaller. By the time you get to the Bronze Age, they're not building anything like this at all. So the time span, again, for those that have forgotten, the Neolithic period is, for me, roughly when Doggerland disappears and Britain becomes an island between 8 and 8,500 years ago, to approximately 4,500 years ago, when we get a new period called the Copper Age, which lasts to about 4,100 years ago, and that's a period known as the Beaker period. But that's we'll actually be coming into that today if I can move. So you can see that people would have needed and had to have had sites like this. It was part of their process in life. In life, as you are in death, the memento mori of the medieval period is standing out where we are now, where I am in death, where you shall be, right? And people are reminded of this, and you know, death is a fascinating, amazing journey. We've all got to do it, and it's a wonderful journey, and it's part of life. And this is what they felt in the past, and this is what some people feel today, as demonstrated. The achievements of Neolithic society and the construction of these monuments does, however, tend to overshadow equally great efforts in the way they were living, alongside technology. So it's not these sort of great sort of chambers that we're talking about. It's actually settlement, living with each other, having the sense of intercourse, not in the way that you think, but intercourse in the way that that we're thinking, i.e., that people are able to live together in sort of family and community groups. So that's a great achievement. People were living in communities in the Mesolithic period before this, but they were doing it more and more in the period of the Neolithic. And Peter's sent me some images of stones which are to be found at the back of Tinkinswood burial chamber, but over to st.Lythans. And the other thing as well is people are very much involved in sort of trading objects in a bigger scale. This is also the period then the pottery comes of age. We may have had evidence of pottery in the Mesolithic period, but pottery is becoming big in the Neolithic. We had agriculture in the Mesolithic period, but agriculture becomes big in the Neolithic period. What does the Neolithic period mean? The new Stone Age, the lithic stone, Neolithic. So one thing that we can't ignore is that our landscape of Barry District is incredibly important. It's hugely important. I might be the columnist for the Barry District News, looking at local history and its archaeology. But what I do when I'm writing those columns is I focus on monuments that are still standing today. And I have covered Tinkinswood and st.Lythans in the Barry District series that I've been doing. But there's a lot more that we can say about the Neolithic period that is hidden under our surface. Agriculture didn't leave much in the way of evidence, but there is evidence of this. And hang on a minute. So if it didn't leave evidence, but it did leave evidence, what the hell is Karl on about? It's quite simple. It's really, really quite simple. The evidence of trees being cleared so that people can plant crops began in the Mesolithic period, massive in the Neolithic period. And then when lots of trees have been cut down in the Neolithic period, that's the evidence of agriculture. Because then it gives way to the Bronze Age, and then it gives way to the Iron Age, then it gives way to the Roman era, then it gives way to that transitional period between the Roman era and the Normans, and so on and so on. So the evidence of the Neolithic is the fact that lots of trees were felled. And okay, we said it last week if you didn't spot it. If you're able to bury people on the headland of Friars Point. That's evidence again that trees had already been cleared in the Mesolithic and mainly in the Neolithic period. So the pure evidence that people are burying their dead at Friars Point and Cold Nap is the clearance of the trees. That's the evidence. In the absence of evidence doesn't mean to say that the evidence isn't there, proving that people lived in the area in the Neolithic period. So, you know, this is one thing that we do as archaeologists now. We go beyond the line, which is something, the work of Tim Ingold, beyond the line, which we also do at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday. So the impacts of all this, and also impactually trade artifacts from a long distance found in the Barry area. We're talking about axes from Penmaenmawr in North Wales. We're talking about all this stuff being found. That's evidence of trade, and that's evidence of people living in the area. So, you know, we mentioned last week about burials on Friars Point. We mentioned that coming from the likes of the Neolithic into the Bronze Age, and last week we looked at John Romilly Allen in quite some detail, and last week we also looked at Archaeocambrensis, and then what we then did. We ended looking at the likes of John Romilly Allen last week, and we saw some of the flints that he had found, and we mentioned some of the locations where we get artifacts, right? And I'll show you this off screen after we've come away from this image. But finally, looking a little bit more about this sort of Neolithic period, and looking at this monument, which I haven't mentioned much about, but I'll just do so very, very briefly. And that's looking at it side on. And do you know what? What I don't do, and what I would like to do, is do take you to tinkinswood. So I'm going to, Ruth, that's going to be a date, right? So Ruth, I'm going to take you, the gang, to tinkinswood in the summer, right? Thumbs up. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to meet in the summer. What we will do, instead of me meeting you and Barry at the studio, right? We'll meet you at tinkinswood, and that's what we'll do. And we'll have a picnic. Pete's providing the cake. Ruth is providing the biscuits. I will provide a flask for my own consumption, and the rest of you can bring your own drinks. See, I'm very generous in this. So that's what we'll do in the summer. But I would like to take you to tinkinswood, and maybe not take you to st.Lythans. And the reason why I want saying that, because I want to do st.Lythans again, because there's a lot more to st.Lythans than meets the eye. It's not just this, right? And you know, one thing that I'm going to say, I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to spoil it when we actually go to st.Lythans, but it used to be said that when an antiquary, which is what we're doing on a Tuesday evening, we did the antiquaries last night, but unfortunately Pete will remember the lecture from last night. We tried to get everybody to sign on at 7:30. We were talking and looking at lots of things. The lecture started about 5 to 8. The lecture last night didn't finish until 15 minutes past 10.
Oh.
Exactly, because it was so intense, wasn't it, Pete? As usual.
Oh, it was.
Do you know what? Last night I was so proud. It was like a cat. It was like the cat licking the cream, right? I thought, right, we've finished 14 minutes to 10, right? And we managed to do another 30 minutes questions. So anyway, so the one thing I want to say is an antiquary recorded that there was a human body resting with its head at the back of this chamber, right? And he said that human body with the head resting at the back was actually really old, right? And I remember seeing the illustration about 1,000 years ago. I don't know where I saw the illustration. It's probably in a document that's either gone or whatever. But it was an antiquary. He wrote this illustration of what this looked like inside. That would have been impossible. There's no way that would be, because it's also known as the greyhound bitch's lair. In other words, they kept greyhounds in there. right? And it makes me think a minute, right? If you're able to keep greyhounds in there, why couldn't you have used this in the past to keep little lambs? Hang on, I said it at the same time. Little lambs. And the other thing is that's really important because you know, that song by Mike and the Mechanics, every generation blames the one before. That one,
Yeah.
right? The reason why I've used that line is like thinking, well, you know, generations are important, children are important, lambs are important, piglets are important. And it may be an incredible statement to make that maybe these could have been used initially to keep animals safe. A wolf wouldn't have been able to get in there, right? It sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it will sound equally ridiculous for me to state that the sites like Maiden Castle, which is a site which is over 50 acres near Dorset, not no Dorset, in Dorset, in Dorchester, Maiden Castle itself is 50 acres with massive banks and ditches. Not really easy to defend because you would have needed people to defend it. And I make the statement that you'd have built that to keep foxes and wolves out, to keep your animals safe, because your animals and your children are the most important commodities back in the Neolithic period, and they still are in many ways. What would we do without our children, Pete, me, everyone else? So you know, that's a really good point to make. What I'd like to do is sort of little bit of an introduction to talk about this sort of Bronze Age period. And it's a shame that we go into the Barry book and the Neolithic period is not many pages at all. Because we go into the Bronze Age and the Bronze Age isn't many pages at all. In fact, we could do the Bronze Age from page 36, 37, 38, 39, and that's all we've got on the Bronze Age. And I feel very upset by that, because those mounds on Friars Point date to the end of the Neolithic period into the Bronze Age. Right, so we got those mounds. We've also got evidence maybe of mounds in other parts of Barry as well, Polnap as well. Talk of mounds over in Coitry, for example, and other evidence of the Bronze Age over at Biglis. So we're building up a picture. Bronze Age evidence at the Atlantic Trading Estate. Oh, we're building up a real picture. The Atlantic Trading Estate stuff is not in here. And I, because they were only working at the Atlantic Trading Estate when this book was being being prepared in 1984, and the section being prepared by Gareth Dowdall. Now, what I'd like to just quickly say, if you're looking at, okay, again, use my ideas. In the absence of evidence, there were settlements on Barry Island. Well, where are they? Well, why are you burying your dead on a headland at Barry Island? What, you know, why can't you just have lived there as well? There's the rest of the land at Barry Island to live. It would have been a perfect place to live. You know, you could have had your animals would have been safe. You know, and so on and so on. Yeah, and you could have. Okay, let's not say that they would have had rabbits. They may have had hares wandering around, but obviously not rabbit warrens and stuff in the Bronze Age. And people would argue that hares may have been introduced a lot later, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. But we know that we know that in the prehistoric period, people kept voles.
Ew. Rolls.
Voles, and somebody
Why?
said, "Ew, go on, do ew." Voles, right?
I did, because you know why cats don't eat them?
Why?
Because they taste disgusting, apparently.
Is it?
Yeah, they'll eat a mouse, they'll kill a vole, but they won't eat it. Just saying.
And also, yeah,
Never
it's the
tasted
same.
one myself, mind.
It's the same with the toad. It's the same with the toad. So we're actually we're getting very close to the end now. So we've more or less done it now. But I want to do in this absence of evidence, right? So what we do find on Orkney, right? We have a type of vole that comes from the Netherlands that would have got to Orkney when Orkney was an island. So those little voles had travelled all the way from Orkney, right, all the way on boats, and they would have been carried to Orkney. They must have been enough of them to have started a population of Orkney voles. Oh, okay. Maybe you might accidentally have a vole hiding in your clothing somewhere, or in your hair, like mine. Right. Oh, but come on, they must have taken them with them. So,
That's
people
right. In
do-
amongst the skins and one thing and another, of
in
course.
amongst the skins, right? Or if the
And you
woman
only
had
need
a
a
great,
litter of them, not
Well-
an individual, really.
but what I'm trying to say, it might be proof that they actually ate them, right? But anyway, but what we're trying to get at is, in the absence of evidence at Cold Nap and obviously what we do find at Friars Point, we're finding evidence of these burial sites, and therefore people must have lived nearby. What we do find at the Atlantic Chain Estate, which we've already mentioned, which is not in the Barry book, which we're not doing today, right, is at the Atlantic Chain Estate. We've got evidence of a Bronze Age village, which I've got the pleasure of saying that I assisted in the excavations. But the fate of the archaeological remains at the Bendrix is Atlantic Chain Estate is another thing altogether. So next week, what we are going to do, we're going to go into the Iron Age. We'll mention a tiny bit about the Bronze Age next week. So what I want to do is ask if there's any questions. But what I am going to do at the same time is show you some images from the Barry book. By the way, you might still be able to get hold of copies of the Barry book in W.H. Smith's. That's the last place I ever saw them for sale. And copies of the Barry book go for about £20-30 on the internet, or copies of Karl-James, Langford, Romans, and the Vale of Glamorgan go for 45 or 50 quid on the net. And if anyone wants to buy a copy at that price, I've still got 1 or 2 copies. That's my original book from 1996. Peter, if you've got a copy, get it on the internet. You could get 40 quid for it. Right, anyway, but that's my book from 1996. It's you haven't got a copy of that, I don't think. Pete wasn't even interested in history and archaeology back then. Right, so okay. So here we go. And a partridge in a pear tree on the 5th day of Christmas, my true love said to me. Right, okay then. So what I'm going to say is that's what we showed last week. Some of Romney Allen's flints. I do believe we may have actually shown them. So these
Yeah,
are actually from Friars Point, the Bronze Age ones.
we were surprised. We weren't expecting them to look so sophisticated and finished.
Yeah.
We were just
well-
thinking little flakes.
Well, it's a bit like you, Kate. You're sophisticated and finished.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
After 70
and
years
there is a little map. There is a little map of our Bronze Age stuff. You can actually see that there's lots of evidence of flints indicated in the Barry district area, over by St. Nicholas, Dufferin, and all the rest of it. So this is what we've got. We've got all this evidence in this area, and some stuff on Sully Island then, which wasn't an island. Lots of stuff in the Vale of Glamorgan. So, we've got all these burial mounds in the Vale of Glamorgan. But one thing I was saying last night, in the Bronze Age, all these mounds in the Vale of Glamorgan are only about 1/10 of what probably existed before the Second World War. Because in the Second World War, they flattened them all to put a runway at Landau and to put a runway at st.Lythans. There were hundreds of them, if not thousands, in the Vale of Glamorgan. Right, so what we're going to do, before we have questions, right, if the raffle prize is not up to par this week, right, and I hope you put all those raffle prizes through Richard's door, right?
I haven't, but I'm keeping them safe. It's got quite a little pile
you've
there.
you've got to put them through Richard's door just to wind Paula up. She's waiting for a Patrick O'Connell calendar. Oh, I said, so basically, Julie, Jenny has number 1. Ruth has number 2. Peter has number 3 and 4. Richard has 5 and 6. Kate has 7. And Kathy has 8.
He wants them
To
to
try
win
to
it.
get them to win, because they always complain about it.
Right, so what is the raffle prize?
The raffle prize today is a sort of relic from the commercial history of California agriculture. and
Go on, give it to
export.
us. Go on.
It's a free walnut opener. Can you see that? It's on a card,
Open a walnut.
and it's like a coin, but it has a sort of pointy end that you use
Oh,
to
wow.
prise open, and I think you're only supposed to use it for California walnuts, but I would never tell.
Actually, John, well, as that's a really decent prize, Pete's lost number 4 and Richard's lost number 6 because I want to give everyone a fair chance of winning it. Right, so, right, what we're going to do, we've got to get the, to prove, Jenny, this is so bent and corrupt, right? No, Jenny, look at that, right?
Yeah, what is it?
We've got a special
Yeah, no,
thingamajig,
it's
so I can't
better.
fake it. So what we're going to do, we're going to put numbers 1 to 6 on there, right?
Yeah.
For the
It's
wall,
1 to 8.
right?
Oh, no,
And what we do, Jenny, right?
Yeah, it's all
Jenny, put your
together
finger
now.
in the air. We're gonna
Yeah,
press the
Peter,
button. Go on, Jenny. Go on,
Oh,
Jenny. Go on, Jen. Here we
Here
go.
we go.
It's number 1. Oh my God, she's won it.
You win it! Thank you, everyone.
Oh my God, that's a half decent raffle
Ask
prize.
if you'll have to, take it off, use it, of course.
And actually, next week's raffle prize might be 2 tickets to the walk at tinkinswood burial chamber happening that weekend.
Yay.
That would be nice.
That'll be nice, but it'll be in the dark with Dirty Jeff.
Ooh.
The reason why they call him Dirty Jeff will come apparent when you're on the walk. Right, okay then.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Let's right, Kate, have you got any questions?
I did have, what is it? Tinkinswood, those reconstructed walls. Is there evidence? Were there walls there on the sides of it?
Well,
And he's just
well,
said they look like
if
this.
you look, yeah, if you look, Kate, right, on the left-hand side, the stones are lying horizontally. They're original.
Yeah.
But the ones herringbone have been mocked up. And also, if you go to St. Peter's Church at Cog, right, when the Marquis of Bute was reconstructing St. Peter's Church at Cog, the herringbone there was part of his reconstruction work. People have actually thought that was Anglo-Saxon building at St. Peter's, but unfortunately it wasn't. It was actually reconstruction work that me and Richard found out was actually done in the late 1800s. Am I wrong or right, Richard?
Oh, you're right.
Good. And on that one, Richard, have you got anything you'd like to say this week, Richard?
No, I think I'm pretty happy with what.
I'm glad Richard's happy. He would have loved to have won the raffle prize as well. I would have loved Pauline's face. Look, Pauline, here's some nutcrackers. Right, Jenny, anything you'd like to say?
No, I don't think so. No, thanks
Have
very
you-
much, man. Really interesting.
Have you enjoyed it this week? Are you going to be back?
Oh, yes, given the opportunity. Thank you.
You could zoom
Oh,
this.
I tell you what, you'd love the opportunity with me, but that's another lecture. Talking about opportunities, Pete, would you like to say something?
No, fine. I've said all I was going to say. Yeah.
By the way, Pete sent me an image earlier on, which he will say, why didn't you show the gang? So, what was it, Pete? Was it an email? Or was it text?
Yeah, I just emailed the photographs that were on my phone. I only had the 2 on my phone. I got other photographs taken with my camera, but I couldn't send them.
Oh, there it is. These are the stones at the back of the chamber, right?
Yeah.
Basically, this is another thing. Oh, Pete, actually, Pete, you know what? I've got my lecture on Tuesday about wrong reconstructions of the past, right? I've really got to do tinkinswood because these stones at the back really put what they see. These stones piled up on the back is that's the way they looked, but these stones have been moved and placed there after the excavation, so it's given a wrong interpretation of the Neolithic period. Thank you for that, Peter. Yeah, we're going to do.
Thanks, Pete.
So Monsoir will probably join us on Tuesday, hidden in the YouTube. Right, thanks for that, Pete. So who have we got left? We've done Richard. We've only got Kathy. Oh, by the way, I've got to mention this. There's a woman called Kathy whose name shall not be mentioned from the old Landscript Major class who's Kate's met. When we ever used to go to prehistoric sites, she always used to she always used to take the coins that had been placed in the crevice and say, "Oh, these stupid people leaving money here." And she used to keep it. I was with my children once, right? And she said, "Why is that woman over there collecting the money that we've just put on the stones as votive offerings?" It didn't go down well. Right. So, Kate, Kathy, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, thank you. Thank you. It was very interesting. But I'm fine,
I'm glad. I'm glad you thought it was very interesting. I got to have a cup of tea and get to the road clearing snow in a minute. Right, because I've already cleared a load. So, finally, Ruth.
Fine, I'm all right.
Anything you'd like to say at all?
I go back to Greece in June.
Oh, you lucky girl. Where?
Same place.
Where?
Lassos Bay.
Oh, no idea.
It's
nice.
Lucky you.
You're going back to Greece.
Who's
Is that,
taking you?
is that with your friend?
With John?
My friend Jan.
Oh, right.
Jan.
Oh, for a
Lovely.
week or fortnight. Oh,
Is that with your friend?
Yeah.
No, not
Oh,
John.
right.
Somebody
No,
else.
with my friend Jan. She's
Oh,
60.
do you think this Ruth? Do you think this suits me?
Oh, you look gorgeous, honey.
Oh, that's
right.
just the thing a lady pirate would wear, yeah?
Yeah. So there we go. Does that look good?
Oh, gorgeous.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. Do you know what? Right. And look at this. Does that look good as well?
Oh, that's
yeah.
fab.
Somebody's costume.
Who's dressing up as a lady pirate?
Yeah, I can do that if I want to.
Okay. Just don't go in the
Allowed
ladies'
to dress.
do. We won't
I'm
have you.
allowed to dress up as a lady pirate. By the way, I'm going the oranges, so I'm not going to be doing that today.
Socks.
Well, yeah, but do you know what? What I found, ladies, I found the most attractive women in the world have usually got small breasts.
Very interesting.
Anyway, any other questions from Jenny, Ruth,
No.
Kathy, Kate, Peter, and Richard?
An enjoyable
No,
morning.
not for me.
Yes, it's
Enjoyed
great.
it today, folks.
No, you're okay.
Yay, nice to see you all.
Nice to see
So-
you all.
So what I'm going to say, if anyone wants to join us on Tuesday evenings or Wednesday evenings, they need to let me know. If not, I'm going to say goodbye to all the gang now. And Jenny, it's been a delight having you on board. And Kathy and Ruth and Kate and Richard and Pete. See you next week. Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Take care,
everyone.
guys. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Cheers, then. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Cheers. See you, ladies. Mwah. Bellissimo, le route along la plan de square. Anyway, so this didn't go out live, unfortunately, but I will be putting this out live. So there we go. And I do believe I've lost some stuff on my computer, which is a shame. But anyway, that's it today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If anyone thinks I'm a cross-dressing actor, I do cross-dress, so that's fine. So orange is needed. Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe and join. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.